Sam Balto, welcome into the shed, man.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's good to see you, indoors, calm, not out at some event. We're both running around.
Yeah.
So, what do you want to talk about?
Let's talk bike bus world.
Let's do it. I'm not going to assume that everybody knows
Oh.
all about you.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of people do.
But we should give them the background.
This is the famous Coach Balto.
Not
right
everybody, we go way back. So
here. Yeah.
I know, I feel like it's very appropriate that we're doing this because, BikePortland has been a big part of the bike bus success that we've had and my personal success. So, it feels special to be here at this time.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for saying that, Sam. It's been fun. We actually connected first on probably the Red Cup project stuff you were doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we met one day after school on like Rosa Parks and Interstate at that coffee shop.
Yeah, you lived in my neighborhood, and I'd see you riding up and down Rosa Parks all the time.
Yeah, I used
with
to
the big
teach at
grin and
Cesar Chavez.
your cargo bike.
Yeah.
And I was like, who's this guy? New into town, doing stuff I really like, tactical urbanism, putting red cups out. So immediately, of course, I go to Google and I start searching up Sam Balto red cups, and I'm like, so you put a picture of Tom Brady on a traffic cone in front of your school in Boston where you first started doing the bike bus stuff. So tell for folks, we don't have to go all the way back, but there might be some, I think there's a fair amount of people, maybe Portlanders or people that aren't as online and don't follow every single bike bus thing. It's like, who's Coach Balto before he was the bike bus Coach Balto?
Yeah, so I'm a physical education teacher. I taught PE in Washington, D.C. and in Boston and in Portland. And I sort of say when I was teaching in Boston, I was doing Safe Routes to School. I was a Safe Routes to School champion at my school, the Ellis. And we did our first walking school bus like 9 years ago. And I sort of say ever since that morning and seeing how the students arrived and how different that was and all the other mornings with the chaos of the school car line and kids coming off like overstimulated on the bus and having crossing guard duty and just like seeing the kids doing the walking school bus and how the parents felt and how I felt, I was like, oh, this is it. Like, this is how we need to be, moving and setting up our students for success. So ever since that morning, it's sort of been this like new adventure.
And that was like 2015, 2016? When was
it
that?
was like spring 2016.
So for you, when I hear you talk, it's often about, it's really the first sort of inspiration motivation was like, get kids moving.
Yeah.
It's like physical activity, obviously PE teacher, but like, is there something in your past that put you on that track to begin with? Like, how did you become a PE teacher?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd say during college, I was a camp counselor at a sleepaway camp, and that sort of experience really resonated with me, and just being able to be that like positive person to help, the children at camp and just explore themselves and to take risks. So I did that for a while, being a camp counselor, doing cheers and all those fun things. And then I worked for a national nonprofit called Playworks in DC and in Portland. I've actually lived in Portland before this second stint. And so I was a Playworks coach at King Elementary. And that's actually where I met my wife. And then I moved back to Boston, went to grad school at Boston University. And then I got my job teaching in Roxbury in Boston. And sort of, like you said, PE teachers were always trying to find ways to get kids to be more physically active. And I just saw with my students, I only had them once a week for 40 minutes for PE, and they'd have recess once a day for 15 minutes. And that's just not the 60 minutes, every single day that these, kids need to get all the benefits of being physically active. So I really saw personally for myself, like building in physical activity, just, walking or biking to the places that you need to go just builds in that movement. And so when I heard about a walking school bus, I was like, oh, we should definitely try this because, in Boston, busing is a big thing. And so if you live on the 1 mile side of the street, you qualify for a bus. But if you live on the inside mile of the street, you don't get much support at all. You don't get any support. And so I really saw like how that negatively impacted the students, and that I really think that like those kids that didn't get bus service like still needed help, and those families needed help. And so we did our first walking school bus. I wore these shoes. These are my special shoes. Get them on camera.
Yeah.
And I wore these 9 years ago on our first walking school bus.
Way.
And
Oh, that's
and
so
I wear
cool.
them when I was on NBC Nightly News when we did our bike bus, and sort of all the big occasions. I wear these to remember those students and to remember like how impactful they were for me in this journey. And so it's funny when people are like, oh, you just started with the bike bus. It's like, I've been doing this for a while, and the bike bus at Alameda has just been this amazing, like, taking it to the next level.
Yeah. I love learning that you were a camp counselor.
Oh,
that just is so like unsurprising to me. I mean, I've been on your bike bus.
Yeah.
You just have those vibes.
Totally.
Which is a great intangible thing that I think obviously the kids really respond to, and is a big part of, I think, why you've been able to just, lead this movement to some degree and get so many people excited about it, is that camp counselor energy.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's like the camp counselor, Ted Lasso kind of mindset.
Yep.
Just like very positive. Everybody needs some, good vibes in their day. And, even if, you're a quieter person, I've talked to people who are starting, bike buses, and they're like, I just can't be as loud as you. And you're like,
they're not going to dress up as Gru and, try to do a Gru impersonation before the kids start rolling out like you've done?
Everybody does, their own, everybody brings their own spin, and that's what's so awesome about it. It's like, you can really make make a difference in your own way. And, you might normally be a pretty quiet person, but sometimes you just clap your hands in front of your face, roll your shoulders back, and you're a new person. You're the leader of the bike bus, and you're here to like hype these kids up and the families to really have a great time biking to school. And you can, just do different things.
Love that. So when you got back to Portland that second time, I didn't realize this until I started doing a little bit of research to have you before you came over today, but that you'd done walking school buses before for a while. Mm-hmm. So this wasn't like a new thing for you. So then how did the one at Alameda sort of come together that first time? Because it was really April 2022.
Yeah.
So you'd already been here for a couple of years doing other things, cool things that I'd noticed, the Red Cup project, some other activism, and you're involved in your neighborhood doing some transportation stuff. But then you did this thing, Alameda Elementary, Earth Day 2022. And that was like the start of it, right?
I mean, for like this segment of it, I did not invent bike buses. I would never claim that. I don't think anybody invented children riding bikes to school, but I got inspired by a BC bus, a video in Barcelona. And it's like this 15-second video that I saw in the fall of 2021. And I kind of remember opening it up on Twitter. And I don't think I ever watched the whole video. I maybe watched like 5 seconds of it, and I was like, "Oh, let's go! Like this is it."
Yeah.
Just the music playing, the scale of like the kids claiming this space. I was like, "Oh, we could definitely do this at Alameda." And I just saw, the sort of the joy in kids' faces. And I remember San Francisco was doing bike buses sort of later in the fall, and I think it was like a Bloomberg report, a news article came out. I remember one morning I like looked at the article on my phone, and there was a kid sitting on a cargo bike, and he was like the bike's going this way, he's going backwards, but he's looking at the camera. And I just kind of remember that kid like was like staring at me, and he's like, you need to do a bike bus. And I was like, you're right, buddy, I do. And so we sort of organized the bike bus for Earth Day, and sort of just made a hashtag and put it out on social media to, inspire people to do it. And we did it, and you were there and created an awesome video. And I remember, I said when I was talking to my students, I was like, this is the start of something special. And I think there was a part of me that just like knew something, like this was a moment. And I've always felt with doing walking school buses in Boston, and when I moved to Portland, there's this tremendous groundswell for, active transportation to school and for community. And the bike bus just, when you add loud music and kids riding bikes, it's very visually pleasing. It can really go viral really well, where walking to school, as much fun as it is, doesn't, get you hundreds of thousands of followers on social media.
Amazing how that dynamic comes into play in this as well, because, no offense to like the pedestrian folks out there and the pedestrian and walking advocates, but like that's something that we've noticed all these years is just there's this thing about cycling that is just more interesting online or dynamic, or people identify with it in a way that walking school buses, never just kind of had that big moment. So you had a feeling that what happened on Earth Day in 2022 was the start of something, and boy, has it ever been.
Yeah.
Dang, man, this is crazy. This is just like one thing after another and another. And it's like, I've been doing this for almost 2 decades now, talking to really interesting activists in this space. And I feel like I know your type is like the entrepreneurial.
Yes.
There's the lone wolves. You're not that. There's like the establishment people that like want to just go get a job at a city and use their activism for that. You're not that. There's like the nonprofit people leader. You're not that. It's like, you're this like entrepreneurial activist in this space, like the other stuff you did, right? The Red Cup and the Tom Brady thing, and you're just always doing something interesting. But then this one's stuck, and now you're all in.
Yeah, no, I think this is where I kind of want to take the next step, and that entrepreneurial spirit I think has really resonated with the bike bus, and just how with our community, with Alameda, just being really fortunate and being able to, have a group of parents who can volunteer every week. I just really saw how the consistency of being able to do it really just brought this tremendous growth in terms of the amount of kids that would participate. And then, just more people doing bike buses in Portland and then across the country. And
I feel like it's gotten so big that we don't even need to talk about what's happened in the last 2 years, because I'm just assuming everybody knows. I mean, this thing has been...
I would hope so, but I mean, you can't assume people know anything. And
we'll put it this way. Everybody knows what going viral online is.
Yeah.
You've done that, but you've also gone viral offline. There are bike buses all over the place. West Hills of Portland. All over Portland.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how many now, a couple dozen in Portland, maybe.
Yeah.
But all over the country. A lot of them inspired by what happened on that the stuff you've done here.
Yeah.
Inspiration could come from anywhere, but I mean, you just really embrace this. And, I think people need to feel like they're in a movement to like become part of a movement to some degree. And you've given them that license by like embracing it and not shying away from the leadership and continuing to post online and like, just kind of do it the right way. So I love that. And like, I think everybody, we're super grateful that you're still in the game. And like, now I don't know if people know, but you've taken a year off of school and off of being a PE teacher to be full-time bike bus guy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think from my years of doing walking school buses and, the tactical urbanism type stuff, I think I felt personally like the importance of feeling a part of something that's bigger than yourself, being part of a movement. And, there's all these small communities and, parents and teachers and just community members who are starting bike buses locally, and being able to like bring us all together so we don't all feel like we're salmon swimming upstream by ourselves, but there's hundreds of us to our left and our right trying to break the current. And if we can fight the current together, we're just going to make it farther. So I've been fortunate to be able to take a year off. And I'm working on starting a national bike bus organization called Bike Bus World, which we started with a couple other bike bus leaders around the country, 2 people.
Like Luke and is he part
Luke
of that?
and SF, and
right.
Jess and Andy in Montclair. And now I'm working, and we recently got fiscal sponsorship. So
nice. All right.
I am going to try to, do the nonprofit thing.
Okay.
And, I feel like we have an amazing team of people who are just super passionate. And I think just trying to, just create a strong network of bike bus leaders and all these different, they're in rural areas, they're in suburban areas, they're in cities, and sort of just working on bringing us together, sharing resources, and help, build each other up, and hope to scale as much as we can, and just, remove barriers where that's possible.
When I look online, I don't see any barriers, right? Like I just see you're on a roll. one piece of good news after another. We'll talk a little bit about the big grants that have come in. But are there barriers? Like, what are the barriers that you hear from whether it's someone trying to be a bike bus leader, or, I mean, do you get frustrated emails from people or texts that are saying, "Hey, you made it look easy, but I went to try to do one of these and I couldn't because X, Y, Z." Or is this just like a golden thing that like nobody can say they don't like?
No.
It's like,
I mean, generally speaking, like you can't really poke at the bike bus that much, but you know, there can be barriers. I think one of the biggest barriers is just the mental barrier that like your community can do it. But sometimes, you know, there's just the infrastructure barriers. Like if you live somewhere and your kid's school is on the highway, you know, a 45-mile-per-hour road, and all it has is, you know, a white piece of like bike lane, like it's going to be pretty hard to do a bike bus on a street like that with that kind of infrastructure.
right.
And so I sort of, you know, if you see a bike bus video and you're like, wow, this is amazing, but, you know, maybe the infrastructure is not there, or, you know, you might not have the flexibility to be able to volunteer as, you know, much as you can. I'd say like one is like, can you do something like a walking school bus and sort of work on building that, you know, community cohesion? And a walking school bus is just as good as a bike bus. It just doesn't go viral. And so, you know, maybe just starting there and scaffolding up, you know, walking school bus to a scooter bus to a bike bus. But then also like calling out your like leaders and saying, hey, like, how come these, you know, these communities in Portland and San Francisco and Lincoln, Nebraska and Denton, Texas, like, how come they get to do these bike buses, but like our school's on this highway? Like, where's the protected bike lane? Where's the separated infrastructure?
Yeah.
And so this really is like a call to action to our leaders to prioritize children's mobility and just give kids and families more choices.
See, you start talking like that, and it's really easy for me to understand why you wanted to go all in, basically, and take, you know, I don't know, I was thinking of it like a sabbatical or time away, but I'm feeling like, I don't know if you're going to go back to teaching PE. You wouldn't have to necessarily give me an answer on that, but what you're talking about are these like next level things, right? Which, as somebody who's been in this space a while, I can kind of map things out and kind of get a sense for where something's going to go. It's pretty clear to me that you're not just satisfied, although it'd be super fun and great and we'd all be happy if there were just hundreds of bike buses all over America. Because I think you and I know that would have these impacts that would transcend just that actual bike bus every morning, right? It has all these impacts that we know about and talk about. But the stuff you were just getting at, I think really speaks to, right, like where you're seeing this going and being like, well, why couldn't we be a force to get stuff built?
Totally.
Why couldn't we be a force for doing other things? I'm curious, what else is there, right? Like that you think the bike bus can do?
I got the list for you.
I mean, like...
well, I mean, so in the Bike Bus Earth Day video, in the interview, I watched it recently. I was like, it's amazing how much has changed and how little has changed, you know? And so even in that video, you know, I said like, this is a call to leader to prioritize children's mobility. And, you know, the first thing we did with, you know, going viral and being on national news and just the momentum of the bike bus in Portland and active transportation in Oregon was passing the bike bus bill, which gave flexibility to student transportation funds. And so it is this thing where previously, you know, school districts and municipalities be like, oh, we can only spend our student transportation funds on school buses. And now we've removed that barrier for school districts. And we said, you know, we went to the state legislator and say, hey, our school districts and our communities are ever changing, and school buses are an amazing tool. And I would never advocate for school buses losing funding. Right. But like, let's give our communities more tools. You know, we've seen that, you know, things are dynamic and we don't want to be stuck in one form of transportation. And so being able to give districts and communities just more autonomy and more choices is a good thing.
I'm glad you brought up the bike bus bill. Yeah. Folks want to look that up. House Bill 3014.
Well done.
Passed last session, so 2023. 2 sessions ago, really, because we have the partial sessions on the even years. And so 2023, last full session, right? Passed. So it's been in place for almost a year.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
When it first came out, it was one thing, and then it got compromised quite a bit and changed quite a bit. And I wanted you to hopefully talk a little bit about some of those compromises in terms of like the dynamic between talking about yellow school buses, right? Like there's a lot of institutionalized support and respect in unions, and like there's a lot of power there, and people want to protect that to some degree. How did you feel about that process of like where that bill ended up in the end versus where it started, right?
Yeah.
So they put quite a few guardrails, is what they called them at the time.
That's a perfect term for what they were trying to do.
Where it's like the original language was one thing. It got tons of support. Obviously, all the sort of bike bus people all around Oregon were excited for it. And it was going to be able to like give districts the ability to pay leaders of bike buses and use state money to fund all the various activities related to it. But then, this is how it works in Salem as time goes on and gets more serious and it clears a committee or two. The lobbyists and other people start coming around and like, oh, what's going on? So what I saw was that some of the bus related union folks were like, hey, this is a little bit weird. We have a driver shortage and this is not solving that. And we're worried about state money going to anything that's not related to buses. What's happening? So I feel like there was some fear there. Like, what did you think was happening with that dynamic as it got to the final version of the bill?
Yeah, I think you summed it up pretty well. I think new things are scary. I think when I'm not saying like they were in a trauma response, but when you're really stressed out or you feel like resources are very thin, it's very hard to be forward thinking and to, think about doing things differently. And so it's, like you said, they really put some strong guardrails in. And I think what we're seeing is that the goals of the bike bus bill haven't really been able to be actualized because it's not just funding bike buses, it's paying for crossing guards,
right.
It's paying for parents and community members to lead walking school buses and, the general, the various tools that are, out there. And so when it's really challenging, and I think I've only heard of Eugene trying it out or being able to do it. So I think I would not say that, the bill as it was finally written is like model legislation that we want to roll out across the country. But I do think it is a great first step, and it's really important that we start just thinking of student transportation beyond the yellow school bus, because there are all those students who don't qualify for school buses who live within a mile.
Right.
And those families and those kids are deserving of support as well. And I personally take offense to like school districts that are like, oh, they're within a mile. We can't take on the liability of that. And you're seeing what happens when school districts don't, worry about that, and the incredibly low student attendance rates, the incredibly long school car lines, all these other negative externalities when, I really think like school districts need to be telling municipalities like, hey, we need safe, walkable and bikeable environments around schools so that our kids can get there without their parents driving them.
Yeah, I hear you. It was a bit frustrating how that ended up because of those concerns. They said guardrails, but they really created a bit of a wall to getting the money, in the sense that one of the things they did is they made the school districts have to submit a plan to the Department of Education in order to get the money. And they also, another important thing about the bill that folks should know, which I think is one of the best things about it, is it defined alternative transportation in sort of this education area, the school area. So before there was no way, as you know, the way policy is made and legislation is made, if there's no definition of something, you're not going to, you're very limited what you could do with it, right? That's why we had to define e-bike and make sure that, right, do these different things. Like we had to define residential streets in Portland before we could then attach a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit to it.
Interesting.
It's interesting how definitions work down in Salem. So now there's a definition for alternative transportation, and it came about because of the bike bus bill. They had to separate it from other types of transportation to school. But just to put a fine point, and then we can move on to something else on the bike bus bill. I actually, knowing that the year was coming up, I've been curious if it had its impact. I get really frustrated when bills like that are compromised, and it's like, well, they don't really do anything, so what did we accomplish, blah, blah, blah. And I actually did a records request with the Department of Education for Oregon, and they said they have no records. So essentially no one applied. Essentially hasn't been used yet. So I don't know.
I think it's time we go back to Salem and say, hey, we put up those guardrails and
maybe they're too good.
Yeah.
And we need to open them a little bit.
Exactly. And so, I think perfection's the enemy of the good.
Yeah.
I think we had a huge success with, I think there was one vote against the bike bus bill in the House and the Senate. And so, yeah, let's go back and let's make some adjustments and say, hey, your concerns, while they might have felt valid, let's open it up a little bit more.
Cool. One thing that's always struck me about your work in this space, and even before when it was, I guess 12 years ago when I covered the bike trains in Portland.
Yeah.
Kyle Johnson did bike trains over at Beach and had a similar thing. It was before you could go viral online. It was fascinating.
They're the real ones, of the bike bus, bike train movement. Like the people that were doing it in 2011, 12, 13, cargo bikes weren't a thing.
Yeah.
Social media wasn't a thing. We weren't coming out of the pandemic. It's pretty awesome, how much momentum and how organized they were.
I'm pretty sure he got a national TV spot out of it too.
Yeah, so I think on Nickelodeon and maybe something else.
But what strikes me about, I remember feeling it when I was covering Kyle's thing, and then also with yours is tell me what's the deal with this, or is there anything you can share about this thing where Safe Routes to School has been enshrined in federal law since I think 2006, I want to say. That's when, and I might be wrong on this, I should know, but that's when the federal government passed a transportation bill that actually had set aside money for getting kids to school. They called it Safe Routes to School, somewhere around there, right? So it's been going on for, a couple decades, a while. And it's this government-led thing, and it's it's doing education in the schools. It's I think people can get a sense for what that is, doing some project work, giving out free stuff to kids, encourage them to ride to school instead of drive. We all get that. And then here comes these upstart things led by one, entrepreneurial, ambitious person. And it just kind of, in a way, gains all this attention and success, while meanwhile, the Safe Routes to School stuff, I don't know, if you're not even in that, you may not even know it exists. It kind of doesn't really go viral the same way. What has been your experience interfacing with the established government version of getting kids to school, while you come in and be like, hey, we had 5 million views and I'm going to be on NBC and I'm talking about the same thing that y'all have been trying to do at the government agency. So have they learned from you? Have you learned from them? Do you work with city governments? What's that been like?
Yeah, so I think the first thing with Safe Routes to School is I came up in Safe Routes to School. The city of Boston had a 2-year or 3-year Safe Routes to School grant with Boston Public Schools. So that's how I learned about, got into all of this. And I would just say, bike bus, sort of advocacy, more tactical urbanism style and working with municipal governments. I'd just say it's a symbiotic relationship. And so our government has all these climate and mode shift goals, and unfortunately, sometimes they lack the political courage to just implement them and to really, create the systems and the infrastructure that is needed and that they know is needed to meet their goals. And us as bike bus leaders and people who care about, active mobility for children, need our government to do the goals, but the government also needs something to point to that says, hey, look at this groundswell of demand and, energy we really need to push through. And I feel with, the Alameda and Fremont diverter that you covered really well, I'm very appreciative of, how well you documented that, because it just really shows how much pushback the city gets for pilots. And I really hope that the city finds the courage to actually just do pilots, and then after the pilot, let's have conversations about it. And I am 1,000,000% okay with, diverters being removed after a pilot because they didn't work, but not doing the pilot because people are concerned. That's not how we learn. We learn by making mistakes and learning from those mistakes. And so we need to have a pilot first approach where we, instead of spending 6 months having board members vote and having neighbors write emails, just say, hey, our professional, expertise says this intersection needs a modal filter, needs this improvement. It's going to cost us $3,000 to put up 12 flex posts and track the data. And in 11 months, we'll come back to you with the findings, and please share, here's an email address to share what you're seeing. We'll be out here to talk to neighbors after it goes in to ask you how it's changed. And, that's it.
What Sam's talking about is this diverter on a bigger collector street that's busier in Portland. And it just so happened to be a crossing that you had to do with your bike bus group. Yeah. And so I agree. That's a good illustration of the symbioticness, the symbiosis between the bike bus and the established government, because I'm sure they were able to say,
"Hey, we got the bike bus coming through. We got all these kids."
Yeah, how are you gonna oppose that?
And it's this thing where I think 2 points. One, I think we need to change the name of diverters to modal filters. That's what they call them in Europe. It's a little more wonky, but I think better articulates.
Nobody wants to be diverted.
Yes, exactly. Oh, it just diverts traffic to other side streets, where I'm like, it sounds like you want a modal filter as well. It's always more modal filters, not less. So that's, one thing. And just having led the bike bus before the modal filter went in, before the diverter went in, and then after, when, you're responsible. And, I talked to the other parents who volunteer and do the marshaling, and we've all noticed what a world of a difference those 12 flex posts made. I mean, it's night and day. The amount of cars that we were experiencing and having to navigate on a greenway, which is the preferred walking and biking route. And last time I checked, everybody was able to make it to their destinations. Everybody was able to make it to their houses who were driving. But if we're trying to do this mode shift and we're trying to get children, getting the benefits of physical activity and fresh air and community, we got to create the infrastructure. And that's where our government comes in. Because, you can do little one-off tactical urbanism projects, but that's not sustainable or equitable.
Yeah, so definitely understanding that the government agencies are super key to this. And especially right now, I think now that you've established the bike bus so strong, I'm using Portland as an example, our region, here we are more than 2 years after Alameda really hit big and everybody started talking about it. And you're starting to see these grants come in, which is huge news. So first of all, I want to just mention the first one that came in last month for Oregon Walks, which is a local pedestrian advocacy group. They got a big grant from the Portland Clean Energy Fund. I think it's $300,000 for 3 years, so almost $1 million, $900,000 total, just to organize walking school buses. Then the big news this week with Metro, which is our regionally elected government. They handle land use issues and do all kinds of other stuff around the region. They helped you get some federal money to get a grant at a specific cluster. Tell me about this big grant that just came in this week. Just did a story on BikePortland a couple days ago.
I'd say that's the third grant. The first one, which you also covered, was the wayfinding grant that Peabody Safe Routes to School got for wayfinding for bike buses and walking school buses. So 3 grants in a short amount of time. Again, and like I said, there's this tremendous groundswell for these types of initiatives. And so, I posted that video of I shared it in the text group when we found out that we got the the Safe Streets for All federal funds, and I'm so hyped. I'm so excited about it. It's going to be really big step forward.
Can you paint a picture for me on what injecting $1.1 million into so it's going to go to a specific cluster, which means a specific part of Portland. It's going to be North Portland, Roosevelt High School cluster. So it's going to be a limited amount of schools, right? So it makes sense. They're going to target the investment.
Yep.
So I think I agree with that. That's how you can potentially see if something works or not, as you kind of flood it, go all in one area. So can you paint a picture for me? What's that going to look like on the ground? So what should we expect? And I know you're not necessarily leading the grant or the work. It's going out to a couple of nonprofits, and I think it's going to be some City of Portland staff maybe, but
everybody,
school staff.
It's this incredible group of people that came together to put the grant to make it happen.
So if I have a kid in elementary school, can you help people understand what is that going to look like? So it's just going to mean like it'll be harder for them to miss at their elementary school. There's gonna be more noise about it, more marketing at their school, and more stable leadership. Like, what's that grant gonna do?
Yeah, so I'd say I'm a big picture person. I'm way less than the details, so I don't know all the details about it. I just know it's a big deal.
Yeah.
But basically, let's say Portland Public Schools Safe Routes to School has one staff member, amazing individual.
For the whole district.
For the whole district.
One Safe Routes to School. And it's pretty new.
School.
He's only been there for 3 years probably.
I
2
think
years.
it's like a year and a half.
Year and a half. Oh my gosh.
And he's wonderful.
Yeah.
But that's one person for 86 schools. And what I've really noticed is there's a Safe Routes to School coordinator, Megan Ramey. She does lots of different things. She's in Hood River County. And I think she's one person for... I think it's like 10 or 11 schools, and she's half-time. So, if, that's a full-time position. That's one person for 20-ish, 22 something-ish schools. And, I follow her on social media. She's a good friend of mine. And you're just like, oh, my God, you're getting so much done. It's like really incredible to see the impact that she's having when you can have someone just hyper-focused on a smaller amount of schools. Making sure that there's bike and pedestrian education, making sure that walk and bike to school day events are happening seasonally. The consistency, even if it's once a season, that makes a huge difference in building momentum. She's incredibly skilled at getting grants, at all levels to improve infrastructure and tactical urbanism. So, I mean, like quick build, not, quick build projects. And so seeing that, you're like, yeah, it makes really sense. And myself personally, from my experience of doing this work in Boston and in North Portland at Cesar Chavez and at Alameda, like when there is one person who's hyper focused on, a small area, you just see really big impact because, I really believe that, if you can touch people on transportation, that's like the most like basic, but also like one of the most important ways that you can impact people. So it really takes this like hyper local humanistic approach where, as a teacher, I can see the kid, I tell the story, my student Lorenzo in Boston, who would show up every morning in a cab. And I'm like, why is Lorenzo showing up in a cab? He lives a half a mile to the east. And then when I talked to him, he said that his mom works the morning shift and that it's not safe to walk that half a mile. So the mom, orders the cab for him. And you're like, that totally makes sense. But like that mom, her first hour of her work is like half her paycheck goes to the cab. Mm-hmm. And like, we need to be there to make sure that there's a walking school bus for Lorenzo every morning. So one, his mom can save that money and that can go to other things, like maybe even saving it. But two, just like, so Lorenzo's mom is like, oh, the community sees me. The community sees Lorenzo and like feels cared for and loved for. And so we really need that like hyper-focused attention when it comes to transportation. And so there's an amazing coordinator. She's a volunteer. She's a parent, Jessica Fletcher at James Johns, and she just loves North Portland and is doing an obscene Herculean feat. And every time I talk to her, she's like, Sam, we got to do like a North Portland cluster, safe routes to school, just infuse, this
she
community.
Must be excited.
Oh, I called her up and if we don't hire her, I'm going to fight those people. This is for her. And, it was just a perfect time. I talked to people at like Peabot Safe Routes to School. And like, we were seeing the same thing that like, one person for 86 schools is like, it's better than nothing, but like, we got to get it down. So if we can get it from 1 to 86 to 1 to 9, let's study that and see how much more impact it has. And hopefully, when we come back to the next, like ODOT, federal, state funding, that's coming up, like, hey, ODOT, let's get more Safe Routes to School coordinators into school districts.
And what I'll say about that grant that Metro got, the federal money, is like they often do, which is kind of smart. Although you're kind of like, oh, we got to spend extra money on the grant for this, but it's really important, especially with these, because this is kind of an innovative thing that states and governments haven't invested a lot directly in bike bus organizing. But they're also there's money in the grant for Portland State University Transportation Research Education Center, TREC, to analyze it and study it and make sure that whatever happens with this in this North Portland cluster can then be, hopefully the numbers are really good. They will be. Then you can then go to government and say, okay, this is a proven intervention.
Yeah.
It really doesn't cost that much.
Yeah.
Look what we could do if, like you said, I hear what you're saying about that capacity of a person to have that heavy touch, right? Like, it's so important. Like I do some community organizing like around basketball and trying to get more kids in our area to kind of like try out, and that's kind of like I'm kind of starting in there. And man, I can see that even in that space. It's like just by having someone show up. It also reminds me of at Abernethy. Somehow I forget how, but they were able. I think it was a PSU intern or something. They were able to hire a leader for their daily bike bus and kind of they were able to do a daily bike bus all the way through, I think, last week or so. Mm-hmm. So they went through some bad weather, but I think it was a testament to the power of having a dedicated person there every time, because I love what you're saying about Jessica, and like, we're so lucky, especially in a place like Portland. We got a lot of people that care about this stuff. It's kind of in the water. So we have all these great activists, but a movement like this shouldn't rely on these people having to step up and devote so much time. Because if she had to leave or move for whatever reason, that whole chunk of organizing would be gone.
Yeah.
So now if we can put the money in and make it stable and institutionalize it, boom, all of a sudden. So hopefully Shane at Portland Public Schools has, I don't know, 15 staff or something. Like,
absolutely. Why not? Absolutely. Let's dream big. And I mean, I would love to see it, 1 to 4, 1 to 2, 1 to 1, and where it's like, you are just like there's a community agent at the school. You're the active transportation specialist at the school, and you're just there ensuring, active transportation is just a key part of the kids' experience. And we just know the plethora of benefits of active like kids moving before school is beyond well researched. They do better academically, they get in trouble less, they have better social relationships, they have more confidence. And the issues around absenteeism, it's like, to be able to put one staff member at a school who can really hyper focus and ensure that kids who don't qualify for the bus are getting to school.
That's a big issue. A lot of people don't connect to bike bus and active transportation at school as absenteeism. It's interesting, right? Because Rep. Wen, who really was the main sponsor of the bike bus bill, she'd done some work in schools, right? And that was her main frame. She was doing
walking school buses, And
she was talking to her legislator friends, her fellow lawmakers, saying, look, this is about absentee rates. Yeah. Kids aren't coming to school because of transportation barriers. Yeah. That's crazy. So,
and even sometimes, I might not understand, but, we still need to get those kids there. Like, even when there's an apartment complex where they do qualify for the bus, kids still aren't going. And so you need even that more hyper local connection where the staff member, someone who has that relationship with the students and the families there, and saying like, hey, let's go, get on your bike, or we're going to walk, with this group of people, and we're going to make it fun and safe. They need that. Communities need that. Families need that. And I think it's about seeing kids and meeting, them where they are and setting kids up for a successful school day.
Yeah. And as we talk about this, I feel like a lot of people in our space, Sam, you probably can relate to this. There's this scarcity mindset. We've always been not funded to the point where we want, right? I think it's just pervasive throughout this movement, unfortunately. I love the people who aren't afraid to talk big. Deb Hubsmith, actually, Safe Routes to School, the late Deb Hubsmith, amazing spokesperson for Safe Routes National Partnership leader. Mm-hmm. When I used to go to the National Bike Summit, that's one thing I remembered about her. She could walk into any room with a straight face and be like, we need $100 million, right? In a world, in a sphere where a lot of people are just like, oh, please give us a Shero. Yeah. Please, we'll work with the $10,000 pilot project, right? So people are listening to what how you're describing the need for just flooding this cluster with this. And I'm like, don't think of it in a scarcity mindset, because, and I think you're thinking this way too. Doesn't it make sense to think about this on par with the yellow school buses?
Yeah,
why would we not equate it to that?
I think like we put this on par with like federal highway funding.
Okay, there you go.
It's like,
okay, you're getting bigger than I am then.
Oh,
okay.
I mean, when it's this thing, what's the saying that I say? Anything is possible with money and political will.
Absolutely.
And so that might be a stupid comment, but it's true. Like, we have money. Look, we demolished in our history. We demolished entire communities to make it easier for people to drive. The amazing thing about making it easier for children to walk and bike to school is that nobody's going to lose their houses.
Yeah, that's not even anything.
What are we like? What are we waiting for?
Yeah.
Nobody loses their house to put a protected bike lane network in their city. Like, let's go. We demolished entire communities to make it easier for people to drive. And all we're asking for is for some protected bike lanes, some reallocation of the existing road space. And this is just where one day people will it will click and we'll have that political courage to prioritize this. And I think, what better time than now and to focus on children and, really just see for, and show them that like we care about them, we care about their, their futures, and then we care about the planet.
As you get further down the road of getting more money, more attention, more legit, you're going to be head of a nonprofit now. So when that happens, I'm just saying,
yeah,
this, as the bigger you come, the more there are people out there that are going to be coming after you in a different way, let's say, because you have potential now to gain more of what they want, whether it's money or power, influence, let's say. And there's a couple things I want to ask you about, just so that we have them out here, just on the record. Like, what do you say about people that are like listening to this, looking at this bike bus stuff online and being like, that's nice for you guys, but we don't have the money, or that's a wealthy white thing. Like, do you hear that critique? Is it the equity issue of saying, well, Alameda is fine, but those are all rich people who have the ability for their parents to come with them or something? Like, how do you respond to that concern?
That's a great question. I would say, there's 5 things we need to do to be able to do a bike bus anywhere. And so I'd be curious, like, are those people saying that because they want it, or are they just, trolling and that's just this, but they're just moving on and it's a comment.
Like, they don't really care about it.
Yeah,
they're just saying, critiquing it because they don't like, it's not for them.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if it's not for them, it's like, it's the bean soup sort of idea. It's like somebody's making a bean soup online and someone says, oh, but I don't like beans. You're like, well, then keep scrolling.
Keep scrolling.
So okay. It's like, well, what about this? It's like, well, maybe it's not for you. But I would say, to go back to the 5 things, we need to teach kids how to ride bikes. We need to give kids bikes. LeBron James has done that. We need to have a base level of infrastructure to be able to, kids to be able to do bike buses and walking school buses. We need to pay people to lead them. And then the last one, the one that we don't think about, is secure bike parking at, where people live, on in apartment complexes, and secure bike parking on ground level at school.
So you're saying if those 5 things are met, you can do it anywhere.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter, rich, poor, black, white, whatever.
And again, like, this works for our community. If another community wants to do it, we are here to help as we can, and, come join us. Help us. Don't, just throw stuff at us and throw mud at us. Like, join this movement, because we need all the help we can. And so, right now we're volunteers, and hopefully soon we'll have a paid staff member, but it's like, help us get funds, help us get those money, because like, we would love children everywhere to be able to do bike buses, but just, saying you don't like bean soup and like moving on, like, you're not helping, you're not doing anything.
Yeah. And I guess in a way, the increase in funding, and like you said, 3 grants recently, I have a feeling like there's gonna be more and more money coming down, obviously.
But I mean,
right?
it's even like, with the federal funding, like SS4A grants, like
Safe Streets for All.
Safe Streets for All, like that, is humongous, groundbreaking funds, but in the grand scheme of the infrastructure package, it's like probably less than like
nothing.
0.5%.
Yeah.
And,
but what I was going to say is that if there are critics out there that are trying to say this is a wealthy white thing only in certain neighborhoods is going to work, I would think that there would be less of that once there's more money available. I mean, like the grant that's going in is going into North Portland because it's statistically people are making less money in that cluster. That's 67% people of color, kids of color in that cluster. So I'm thinking maybe those critiques won't be as strong. But that is something I think this movement's going to have to reckon with. And the PSU research that just came out identified that. Like that was just at the they just had a transportation seminar. They talked about some of the initial findings of, they did some research of the local bike buses, right? Yeah. And they did it, and they started looking at the data of like who's leading and where are they at, and it's like very wealthy schools and very wealthy parent groups.
Yeah.
And it kind of came up in the back and forth in a Q&A, and they're like, yeah, it's kind of a thing. It's wealthy. We're going to have to look into that. So I think that's going to continue to be a critique.
We've known that since day one because like I've said, like volunteerism is inequitable and unsustainable.
And then if there's money coming in, the volunteerism isn't as important. So I think it should be considered more equitable at that point and less of a strong critique, but we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, as like clearly, you know, less affluent communities have less ability to volunteer.
Yeah.
And so if that's an issue that, you know, you want to see a bike bus in, you know, less affluent communities, it's going to require more resources, and our government has those resources. So let's go to them to get those funds and resources.
And it also gets to that point of where we all know as transportation people, those are the communities where the infrastructure is worse, right? So they're going to have a bigger barrier to having their kids get on bikes. Therefore, they need that high touch from the government. They need more investment to make sure that their bike buses can be safe, which then opens those questions of, hey, if we're investing in bike bus organizing over this school area that doesn't have great transportation options, we got to make those roads safer for them because you're not going to say we shouldn't keep kids safe, which
it's that symbiotic relationship.
Yeah. Okay. So there's one other thing on that note that I want to mention, which is like liability, right? So I've been thinking about this a lot because I got this new head coaching job. I'm coaching 7th grade for Roosevelt High in their youth sports. And, I'm the kind of guy that's like, I got this minivan. Like my dream is to be like, you know, if I'm going to Saturdays, I'm going to bring the kids to the gym or even to practice. Like if we end up having to drive to go to a game or something, like I want to go pick them all up.
Right.
So but then there's liability of like, the kids are with me. They're not in the school bus. They're not in the team bus. So and I'm also thinking with bike bus leaders and stuff, is that something that has come up where, how do schools deal with that? Like, because on a school bus, it's fine. You got a professionally certified driver,
right? A
contract with a company that they're spending millions of dollars with. But on a bike bus, if it's just a mom or a dad or whatever, how does that work? I'm just curious about that, like the liability piece.
Yeah.
Or are you not allowed to promote it in the school or something? How do they get around that, the liability piece of taking care of these kids while they're in your care?
Yeah, liability.
Or can you not speak to that?
No, I'm happy to speak to it. I'd say there's not really an answer. I'd say it's, you know, we don't ask parents who carpool what liability they're holding, or, you know, if other kids are getting into the car, did you have their parents sign waivers? You know, even if you had everybody do everything to the T and sign, you know, liability and someone got hurt, parents could still sue.
True.
I'd say, you know, it's a dynamic environment. And so like on playgrounds, it will say like play has its inherent risks, you know, and being out in the built environment and in the real world, like kids might, you know, fall down. And, you know, it's like once my son was just standing next to me and the next minute he fell and his face was all bloody. And you're like, what just happened? You know, so it's like stuff happens. Yeah. And I think we're in a very like litigious state right now. And I think what's cool is to see that just so many people are, you know, there's not a great answer. And I think they just really believe in people and humans. And they're just like, you know what? People that are going to show up understand those things, that this is a dynamic environment, and they understand that we're doing the best we can to create a safe environment. But sometimes two kids might, you know, their bikes might touch each other and they might fall down, and we're not going 30 miles an hour. We're going 5 to 10 miles per hour, and we might need a Band-Aid, but it's beyond rare. And, you know, it's been amazing to see how many people don't like not do a bike bus because they're worried about liability. They still believe that it's really important and really has strong impact.
Yeah. And anybody worried about a bike bus, I would be like, look at school pickup lines.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. All right.
Yeah.
I got to ask you about school pickup lines. I know it's like a side.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's my like.
It's a side thing. Is there any way you can take your frustration and energy and anger about that issue and how chaotic and ridiculous school pickup lines are? It's absolutely absurd. Can you please maybe, I don't know, can you bend that into the bike bus stuff that you've got pull in? Like, come on. How does it line up? I mean, obviously, if everybody's got great bike bus, the school pickup lines will be different.
I'd say school car lines are school car lines are policy failures. And when you sort of get into the weeds about, these insanely long school car lines where parents are waiting 30 to 45 minutes to drop their kids off or pick their kids up, you're just like, these are just decades and decades of really bad policy that prioritize the movement of automobiles over the, movement of children and people. And I really hope us as society kind of wake up that like, this is not working. It's not working for children. It's not working for the parents. It's not working for the teachers and the staff. It's not building strong school communities. I mean, go on school car line TikTok and you just see a bunch of people really frustrated and mad and just annoyed at each other. Like
they're all annoyed and they're all sitting in the line.
Yes, exactly. And so it's just like, let's just like park our cars, or just sort of like, hey, we're just gonna park a little bit farther away, and then walk up, get our kids and walk back. And it's this thing that I say, if parents were allowed, and I say this with no judgment to parents, like I'm a parent of 2 kids. It is the hardest fucking job in the world, and we get negative support from government. And so parents are just trying to do their best. But if parents were allowed to drive into the school building and drop their kid in front of the classroom, they would. Mm-hmm. And that's no judgment to them. It's because other parents are doing it.
Yeah.
But similarly, if there was a no car movement law, rule around schools, a quarter mile, a half a mile around the school, and no cars were moving within that area, parents would say, hey, go walk, go, scooter, go walk the half a mile, go ride your bike the half a mile, because there's no cars. The issue is cars. And you create the safety when there's more people out, walking around, biking around. And so the issue is cars.
Yeah. Okay, I was really hoping that you would be able to convince me that the bike bus, the power of the bike bus, would be able to vanquish the school pickup line. But I don't know. I'm not convinced. I think it's an issue, but I don't know. Can you work it into your bike bus world nonprofit? I don't know, because part of that too for me is like one of the things about the bike bus that I don't think has been figured out yet is getting kids home.
Yeah,
and so it doesn't really get to the pickup line, because you can't be like, well, if everybody's doing the bike bus, the pickup line will go away because they're not really taking the bike bus home yet. So anyway, that's just a very related thing, and I'm hoping someday.
I think the thing that change takes time, but we're getting tons of parents who normally would just be sitting in the school car line to maybe once a week, once a month, pick a different way of doing it. And I think the more that they experience it, participate in it, and they see how different their kids feel, how different they feel, biking or walking to school versus sitting and driving their kids, in a car by themselves, I think that will start making that shift. And people, will notice, like, wait a second, like, this is so much more fun, and the fresh air and the socializing, that I think, over time, we will just get that snowball effect where people will be like, school car line is like, and again, parents, there are parents who do need to drive their kids. And what, we find is when there's less cars on the road and less people who have the choice to, go a different way, it's going to be a better experience and an easier experience for the parents who do need to drive their kids for whatever various reason.
Right. I like that. It's like the bike bus movement has really helped change people's ideas about what it means to get to school and what that can mean to the community. It can be an actually positive thing.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't have to be something you dread. It can actually be awesome. So even while there's still going to be pickup lines, at least there's this idea that revolution could eventually
And I think
impact
it's this
that.
thing too, like the line, it's sort of like traffic. It's like there's not a line, it's like, what is it? It's like if there's 20% less cars, then there's no traffic. It's like,
right.
If you just remove X amount of cars, there's not a line anymore. You don't have the 45-minute thing because it's just not that, huge mass of people all going at, a specific time.
And there's probably quite a few of them that are within that 1 mile halo. That would be a nice walker bike.
Exactly.
And
It's
if
that
the bike
vicious
bus stuff
cycle.
succeeds and you get those protected routes in, those parents in the line are going to go, it's not that far. And now Johnny or, Jill or whatever, who can bike home on that nice new bike lane I saw, which the bike bus movement helped get in because of anyway. So yeah, it's all connected.
And I think in Glasgow in Scotland, they were doing research there, looking at drivers' perception of bike buses. So as the bike bus goes by, they would like hand out like a questionnaire that the drivers would then like send in. And drivers were very like okay and understood how they might experience like a 30-second delay, but they really saw it as like this gentle protest and this, reminder like these kids do need to be able to have choices in how they get around.
Yeah, like you said, it's hard. It's really hard to poke at the bike bus. I mean, it's just
children riding bikes
it's
is really
impenetrable.
joyful.
It's great.
And I think, it's if you're against children riding bikes, there's not much I can do, but if you feel like you want it being done more places that aren't being done, then like come join us. Don't poke at us. Help us. Don't try to bring us down.
Okay, that helps lead me into my question here about you're heading to DC.
Yeah,
tell me about what's going on there. And you said something on Instagram this week that was pretty wild, and you talked about, I don't know, I know you right now with what you're doing and you going to DC and how you're usually received when you go on these things. I mean, are you going to be rolling into the White House? I mean, what's going on? Are you trying to get Jill Biden first lady?
Crossed. So
what's going on?
I've been very fortunate, and what was it, 2 summers ago when Secretary Buttigieg was in Portland and in Camas, I was invited to be there, and I got to take a photo with him, and I told him he'd lead a bike bus one day. And I was in DC in September, and I reached out to Secretary Buttigieg, the USDOT press secretary, and I said, hey, I'm going to be here doing a bike bus event and participating in a bike bus in DC. Can Secretary Buttigieg come? And, she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, I don't know if that's going to be hard, but like, would you be okay if we like sent someone else? And I'm just like, so happy I'm getting an email response.
Right.
Like, I don't get a, response from my, like my son's principal, which I do, but it's
No, I
like,
hear what you're saying.
it's like, I can't get responses from like the most, basic people. And, here you are, giving me a response. It's like very appreciated. And he wasn't able to come, but they sent their media team and they put together a really wonderful piece about the bike bus and interviewing kids and just talking about the movement. And I'm from Chevy Chase, Maryland originally, so I'm going home for Thanksgiving. And there's this amazing PE teacher, Alex Clark, who's one of the National High School PE Teachers of the Year. He teaches at Dunbar High School. He does this program called Prime Ability, where he partnered with Outride, which is another nonprofit that gets bike education and bikes to middle school and high school kids. And so his school is about 2 miles. And I was like, I'm just, you got to shoot your shot. You got, you don't get what you don't ask for. So I reached back out and I was like, hey, can we do a bike bus to the White House? And we'll see what happens. I had a meeting with one of Dr. Jill Biden's staff members, and we don't have a big window in terms of the teacher schedule and what they have going on, but you never know. I just, I think it just shows that, the impact that the bike bus movement is having is that, people at the White House are aware of it. And I think, the success that the Alameda bike bus has had, I'm incredibly blessed and fortunate, but like we're nothing without all the other bike buses, popping up and families and communities doing it in all these small little pockets and teachers doing it in South Dakota and up in Portland, Maine. And, so it's this whole movement. And I just feel very fortunate that like I get to be in maybe some, case like the face of it, or, the one that, might have a chance to go to the White House.
I love that.
Yeah.
I feel like this thing is nowhere near over. This star is just getting brighter, I think.
Jonathan, you just keep helping. Please,
keep building.
Anybody there, please keep helping.
One thing I want you to know is that I'm so grateful for all that work. It's really important. But on the Portland side of it, this city, as you know, has struggled with its confidence, let's say, for a few years now, getting a lot of just, bad press and negativity. And for me, I'm always thinking about those days when biking was just like everywhere in town.
Right.
Everybody was talking about it. We had all this pull, and that's gone away. And so like one of the things I love about what you're doing is that you're showing that we still have it here.
Yeah.
We still got it. Portland is still doing cool things. We're still leading the country. And guess what? Okay, Coach Balto is a Portland guy. This is coming from Portland. So when bike buses have taken over the country and they're coast to coast in every part, all types of different places and people doing them, it's like we can always remember that, hey, Portland had a big, that's where that came from, in some ways.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate that aspect of it.
The way I would say it is, I'm an East Coaster, but Portland has an incredible canvas. And I think, and I always try to remind like PBOT staff and just city staff that like they have done a tremendous job like creating a base of line of infrastructure that makes it so easy for Portland to have the the most amount of bike buses per capita for this like global movement because of those
all those neighborhood streets that are so nice
all those
to ride
neighborhood
on.
streets and the the energy they put into the infrastructure. But that doesn't mean we stop. That means we double down on it. We make it even better, and we harden it with modal filters and really ensure that like bike buses don't actually need to exist because right. How we make bike buses to create safety in numbers, the safety is there now. And the culture and the norm again in Portland is that we bike and we, to our friends' houses and to the store and to school. But, really for our, leaders to sort of be like, no, like we don't need to play down what makes us great, build it up, highlight it, and don't, shy away from the years of investments that we've done. And that was for a reason, and to really remember that. And, I try to be intentional. Like when I have a video on TikTok that has like, 18 million views, I send it to, the PBOT staff that I will, give a hard time to when I don't think they're doing enough. But I'll say like, hey, I wouldn't be able to do this. My students wouldn't be able to do this without the work that you did previously.
Good stuff, man.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I never thought of that like the way you said that. If you're successful and this thing really gets to where we all want it to be, why do the kids need to they'll just leave their house and start riding?
Yeah. And
I mean, hopefully they would organize with each other because it's fun to be together, but I hear what you're saying. I mean,
and I think it's this thing that we used to be in this mindset, and myself included, where it was like, if you build it, they will come. And I had this, I think it was last year, maybe it was like a year and a half ago, I was in Austin, Texas, and I was biking around with John Zimmerman of the Active Towns podcast, and he was showing me some cool neighborhood infrastructure, and there was this like awesome two-way protected bike lane, and there was like schools and parks, and I went by the school and there just wasn't that many bikes on the bike racks, and I was like, but you have this amazing infrastructure. And he really put it nicely. It's like you need the hardware and the software. You need the hardware, which is the physical infrastructure, but you need the software, which is like the social infrastructure. And we, don't like to talk about it or admit the level of like how torn the social fabric is of society, but we've really lost that ability and skill of like neighbors to be able to say like, hey, we're both leaving our driveways and going to the same school. Let's carpool, or let's walk together, or let's bike together. And so there needs to be that sort of programming, which is the bike bus, which is walking school bus, that like re-sews that social fabric, and that brings people together, and that helps teach kids and remind kids like what is in our genetic code, that we are, meant to be socially connected and to move our bodies, to be physically active. And I always tell the story when I told my students that we were going to do a bike bus. Maybe it was like a couple weeks before our first bike bus. I had a group of 5th graders. The next day, they all started riding bikes together. And they just like maybe just needed that like reminder, or that permission that like, oh yeah, we could do this. We don't need like this huge orchestrated event to be able to ride bikes, to be able to, walk with our friends. You just know where each other lives. You set a time and you meet on that corner and you bike together.
Yeah, I love that. If there's one thing people take away from this conversation, I hope they realize that the bike bus is about way more than just riding to school together.
Oh, yeah.
And I think you're just a great person at leading that, I think, because you're always making those connections, those deeper connections.
Yeah.
Like we talked about infrastructure and, social fabric. I absolutely agree. A lot of the third place stuff that I think we saw with the national election, like this is a red alarm fire. Like we need to get people so that they can talk to others and like get in their neighborhood. And bike bus has potential to do a lot of exciting things. I don't know how you sleep at night not thinking about all the things that the bike bus can do to save the world. Sam,
I'm working on my meditating.
All right, there you go. So you can sleep. Okay.
So I call all the amazingness of the bike bus. I call the bike bus the original Barbie. So in the Barbie movie, there's the original Barbie, but then there's all these other Barbies that they all have that same meaning of the original Barbie. And so bike bus is just our expression of joy. It's our hopes and dreams and aspirations for our children, our communities, and it's the thing that goes viral. But there's lots of different ways of doing it. So it could be a walking school bus. It could be, a critical mass ride. It could be painting a traffic garden. It could be, there's just so many different ways to show that, to, prioritize children, prioritize community, prioritize the planet. It's just the bike bus is the thing that, gets people really excited because bikes are really fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go. I can't wait to keep watching what you're going to do next, photographing it, whatever, documenting it. Can't wait.
That photo that you took of our bike bus, I mean, that thing is, I know.
Everywhere.
everywhere. And again, I can't thank you enough for, the time and the energy that you put into the Portland community, to the bike world, to me. I just feel very lucky that, you've documented it so well. And, as someone who's an advocate and just being able to sort of have things to document, what I've done, it's just really appreciated. So don't forget to subscribe and become a paying member monthly to BikePortland. And also, Bike Bus World is becoming a nonprofit. So we got nonprofit status. So donate to Bike Bus World so we can,
nice.
I think one of the cool things I really want to do is in Portland, they have micro grants. So in Oregon Metro, for safe routes to school, walking school buses and bike bus. So it's like $500, and it can, for people leading bike buses and walking school buses, kid needs a helmet, you need, a pump, first aid kit, a boom box, you want to give a little incentive to the volunteers, a little gift card that's not coming out of those volunteers' pockets. Yeah. And I think when we go to like equity and paying people, I think there's communities like want to come together and they want to volunteer how they can. But I think, in the effort of getting to dollar for dollar compensation, we can start with like a stipend and we can start with, covering those expenses. And so with Bike Bus World, I really hope that fundraising is good so that we can be able to give out, $250, $500 mini stipends to bike bus leaders around the country to just sort of show like, hey, we see you, we appreciate the work you're doing. It really makes a difference. Take your volunteers out for margaritas and tacos and get to know each other better and, build that strong community. Because I've been able to do that with my group of, bike bus dads, and we go get tacovore and get tacos. We go play pickleball, and it's not, it's nothing excessive. It's, pennies on the amount of time that we've put into the community. But it's just nice to be able to like spend that time together and, be able to bring this like joy and the excitement to our, to the kids.
Yeah. Great stuff, Sam. So glad you're leading it. Thanks so much for coming over and talking about it.
Are we done?
What else you got to say?
I feel like we could go on. I don't know. I'm good.
Hey,
But
no, we
this
got to
was
save some for next time because there's so much
we
more
gotta
to
save
talk
stuff
about.
for next time.
That's what
All
I
right.
love about it. You're always cooking stuff up. You're always doing interesting things. So you're going to come back. We'll just keep it going.
Absolutely. This was meant to be that we're here today.
Yeah. Thanks, Sam.
Absolutely. Thank you.